In the ancient kingdom of Valdoria, where tradition runs deeper than the mountain streams and secrets hide behind every gilded door, one discovery would shake the very foundations of the royal family. What started as a routine security check in the dead of night would uncover a conspiracy that threatened to destroy a 1,000-year dynasty. When Royal Guard Captain Marcus Sterling glimpsed a shadow moving through the king's private study at 2 a.m., he had no idea he was about to witness an act that would divide a kingdom and force a choice between loyalty and truth. The autumn wind howled through the stone corridors of Valdoria Castle as Captain Marcus Sterling made his final rounds of the evening. 23 years of loyal service had taught him to notice even the smallest details: a door left slightly ajar, footsteps echoing in empty halls, or the faint glow of candlelight where none should be. Tonight something felt different. The castle had been unusually quiet since King Edmund's health began declining 3 months ago. The once vibrant halls now carried an air of uncertainty, whispered conversations stopping abruptly when servants noticed his approach. The royal family had been walking on eggshells, each member acutely aware that the kingdom's future hung in the balance. As Marcus approached the east wing, home to the king's private chambers and study, he noticed a thin line of light seeping from beneath the heavy oak door of the royal study. His hand instinctively moved to his sword hilt. King Edmund had been bedridden for weeks, and the study had remained locked and sealed on the Queen Consort Isabella's explicit orders. Isabella Montclair had married into the Valdorian royal family 5 years ago, bringing with her the promise of alliance with the neighboring kingdom of Astoria. Her marriage to King Edmund, while politically advantageous, had always been viewed with skepticism by the court and the people. Unlike the beloved late Queen Catherine, Edmund's first wife who had died in a tragic riding accident, Isabella remained an outsider in the eyes of many. Marcus pressed his ear to the door, listening intently. The soft rustle of papers and the occasional creak of floorboards confirmed his suspicions. Someone was inside. Moving with the stealth that had served him well in countless palace intrigues, he carefully tested the door handle. To his surprise, it turned easily. The heavy door swung open silently, revealing a scene that would be burned into his memory forever. Queen Consort Isabella stood hunched over the king's massive mahogany desk, her usually pristine appearance disheveled. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her hands trembled as she rifled through a collection of official documents. In the flickering candlelight, Marcus could see the royal seal glinting on several of the papers. What caught his attention most was the document she held, the unmistakable parchment and ribbons of the king's last will and testament. Isabella's fingers worked quickly, apparently making alterations to the sacred document that would determine the kingdom's future. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Tampering with a royal will was not just treason. It was an act that could plunge Valdoria into civil war. The succession laws were clear and ancient, designed to prevent exactly this kind of manipulation. Yet here was the Queen Consort boldly violating the most fundamental law of the realm. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, stepping into the room. Isabella spun around, her face a mask of shock and fear that quickly transformed into royal indignation. "Captain Sterling, how dare you enter the king's private study without permission? I noticed the light, Your Majesty. I thought there might be an intruder." Marcus kept his voice steady, professional. "I see I was not mistaken." The insult hung in the air between them. Isabella's eyes flashed dangerously, but Marcus could see the calculation behind her anger. She was weighing her options, trying to determine how much he had seen and what it would cost to buy his silence. "You saw nothing here tonight, Captain," she said, her voice carrying the authority of her position. "Nothing at all. With respect, Your Majesty, I saw you altering the king's will. That is a crime against the crown and the people of Valdoria." Isabella moved closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do you know what will happen to this kingdom if that document remains unchanged, Captain? Prince Adrian is weak. He spends his days writing poetry and painting watercolors while the kingdom of Mordania masses troops on our eastern border. Princess Elena is but 19, unmarried, and has no political alliances to strengthen our position." She gestured toward the will with shaking hands. "King Edmund, in his illness and grief for his first wife, has made provisions that will destroy Valdoria. He's planning to divide the kingdom between his children, creating small, weak principalities that our enemies can pick off one by one." Marcus had heard rumors about the king's unconventional succession plans, but hearing them confirmed sent a chill through his heart. The traditional monarchy had kept Valdoria strong for a millennium. To fragment it now, with threats looming on multiple borders, seemed like madness. "That gives you no right to alter his wishes," Marcus replied firmly. "The king's will is sacred law." Sacred law that will lead to the destruction of everything we hold dear. Isabella's composure finally cracked. I'm trying to save this kingdom, you fool. My changes would keep Valdoria united under a strong ruler who can actually protect our people. Under your rule, you mean? The accusation hit its mark. Isabella's face flushed red. I am the queen consort. I have more right to rule than either of Edmund's children. I've spent 5 years learning the intricacies of Valdorian politics, building alliances, strengthening our defenses. What has Prince Adrian done? What has Princess Elena accomplished beyond choosing which gown to wear to court functions? There was truth in her words, Marcus had to admit. Prince Adrian, while intelligent and kind-hearted, had never shown interest in the martial or political aspects of leadership. He preferred philosophy and arts to warfare and diplomacy. Princess Elena, though beloved by the people for her charity work, was indeed young and inexperienced in matters of state. But Isabella's solution, essentially usurping the throne through forgery, was not the answer. Your Majesty, I cannot allow this to continue. Marcus took a step forward. Please step away from the desk. Isabella's hand moved to a silver letter opener on the desk. And what will you do, Captain? Arrest your queen? Do you think anyone will believe your word against mine? They'll believe the evidence. Marcus nodded toward the altered will. The king's scribes know his handwriting better than anyone. Any changes you've made will be detected. Quote, for a moment, Isabella looked deflated, then her eyes hardened with resolve. Perhaps. But by then, it will be too late. Edmund could die any day now. Once the will is read and accepted by the High Council, any questions about its authenticity will be moot. I'll be queen in my own right, not just a consort, and I'll have the power to do what needs to be done. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside made both of them freeze. Isabella quickly gathered the documents, including the will, and moved toward a hidden panel Marcus knew existed behind the bookshelf. Remember, Captain, she whispered urgently. You saw nothing tonight. Your loyalty to the crown demands your silence. But Marcus knew that true loyalty to the crown meant protecting the legitimate succession, not enabling usurpation. As Isabella disappeared through the secret passage, taking the altered will with her, he faced an impossible choice. Expose the queen consort and risk civil war, or remain silent and watch the kingdom fall into the hands of someone who had gained power through deception and forgery. The footsteps in the corridor grew closer. Soon, other guards would arrive for the changing of the watch. Marcus had minutes to decide what to do with the knowledge that could either save or destroy the kingdom of Valdoria. He looked around the study one more time, noting the scattered papers, the gutted candle, and the lingering scent of Isabella's perfume. Everything in this room bore witness to what he had seen, but would anyone believe him? Would anyone dare to accuse the queen consort of such a serious crime? As the door to the corridor began to open, Marcus made his choice. He would not remain silent. The future of Valdoria was worth more than his own safety or even his life, but he would need allies, evidence, and a plan. The Game of Thrones had begun, and Marcus Sterling, a simple guard captain, found himself at the center of it all. The next morning would bring new challenges, new dangers, and the beginning of a struggle that would test every relationship, every loyalty, and every belief held dear by the people of Valdoria. The crown's secret was out, and there would be no going back. Part 2, Dawn broke. Grey and cold over Valdoria Castle, matching the heaviness in Captain Marcus Sterling's heart. He had spent the remainder of the night pacing his small quarters, weighing his options and their consequences. By the time the morning bells chimed, he had made his decision. He would confide in someone he trusted implicitly. Princess Elena Catherine Valdoria was in the castle gardens when Marcus found her, tending to the rose bushes her mother had planted years before her death. At 19, she possessed a grace and intelligence that reminded many of the beloved Queen Catherine, though her father's recent illness had aged her beyond her years. Captain Sterling, she said, looking up from her pruning shears. You look troubled. Elena had always been perceptive. Unlike her older brother Adrian, who lived in a world of books and artistic pursuits, she paid attention to the people around her, remembering their names, their families, their concerns. The servants adored her, and Marcus had watched her grow from a precocious child into a young woman of remarkable character. Your Highness, I need to speak with you about a matter of grave importance. Privately. Something in his tone made her set down her tools immediately. Of course. Shall we walk to the old pavilion? The pavilion sat at the far end of the gardens, surrounded by hedges that provided privacy from prying eyes and ears. As they walked, Marcus struggled with how to begin. Accusing the queen consort of treason was not a conversation one entered lightly. "Princess," he began carefully, "what I'm about to tell you could be seen as treasonous, but my loyalty to your father and to Valdoria compels me to speak." Elena's face grew serious. "You have my complete attention, Captain." Marcus recounted the events of the previous night in detail, watching Elena's expression change from confusion to disbelief to anger. When he finished, she stood in silence for a long moment, staring out at the mountains that bordered their kingdom. "Are you certain of what you saw?" she finally asked. "Completely certain, Your Highness. Queen Isabella was altering the king's will. She admitted as much when I confronted her." Elena sank onto the stone bench in the pavilion. This explains so much. Her insistence on handling all of Father's correspondence lately, her private meetings with members of the High Council, her suggestions about strengthening the monarchy. She looked up at Marcus with troubled eyes.
"She's been preparing for this. What should we do, Your Highness?"
"We need proof," Elena said firmly. "Your word alone, however trustworthy, will not be enough to convince the High Council."
Isabella has spent 5 years building relationships with key nobles. Some of them might even welcome a strong ruler, regardless of how she obtained power. Marcus nodded. He had come to the same conclusion during his sleepless night. The altered will is evidence, but she has it in her possession. Then we need to get it back. Eleanor stood, her jaw set with determination that reminded Marcus strongly of her mother. "Tell me, Captain, do you know where Isabella went after she left the study?"
"Through the hidden passage behind the bookshelf."
It leads to several locations throughout the castle, including her private chambers. Then we search her chambers. Marcus felt his heart skip. "Your Highness, that would be incredibly dangerous. If we're caught, if we do nothing, Isabella becomes queen through fraud, and Valdoria suffers the consequences." Elena turned to face him fully. "Captain, I've watched my father grow weaker every day. The physicians say he has weeks at most. We don't have time for careful, safe plans." Before Marcus could respond, they heard approaching footsteps. Prince Adrian emerged from behind the hedges, his usual stack of books under his arm, and an expression of mild curiosity on his face. "Eleanor, Captain Sterling," he said with a slight bow. "I was looking for you, sister. Cook said you didn't come to breakfast." Adrian Valdoria was 25, but often seemed younger due to his scholarly disposition and gentle nature. He had their mother's fair coloring and their father's height, but lacked the commanding presence expected of a future king. Marcus had always liked the prince, but he worried about Adrian's ability to lead Valdoria through the challenges ahead. Elena glanced at Marcus, a silent question in her eyes. Marcus nodded slightly. They needed all the allies they could get, and Adrian deserved to know the truth about his stepmother's treachery. "Adrian," Elena said carefully, "we have something important to discuss with you. Something about Isabella." As Elena recounted Marcus's story, Adrian's expression grew increasingly grim. Unlike his sister's quick anger, his response was thoughtful, analytical. "It makes sense," he said when she finished. "Isabella has been asking me about my plans for the kingdom, about whether I truly want to be king. I thought she was just making conversation, but now—" He ran a hand through his sandy hair. "She was testing me, wasn't she? Seeing how committed I was to my inheritance." "What did you tell her?" Marcus asked. Adrian looked embarrassed. "The truth, that I've never particularly wanted to be king, that I think Elena would make a better ruler than I ever could." He turned to his sister. "I still believe that, by the way. Adrian, this isn't the time for—" "No, Elena, it is exactly the time." Adrian's voice carried an uncharacteristic firmness. "Isabella is right about one thing. I am not suited for kingship, but she's wrong about the solution. The answer isn't to put a usurper on the throne through fraud and deception." Elena stared at her brother. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we expose Isabella's crime, but then I formally abdicate my claim to the throne in your favor. You're the one father should have named as his heir anyway. You understand the people, you know the politics, and you have the strength to lead." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for the prince. It took courage to recognize one's limitations, and even more courage to act on that knowledge for the greater good. "The succession laws," Elena began. "Can be changed," Adrian interrupted. "They've been modified before when circumstances required it. Father changed them himself when he decided to split the inheritance between us." "If he really did decide that," Marcus said quietly. "We still don't know what the original will said versus what Isabella changed. Then we find out," Elena said with determination. Tonight, we search Isabella's chambers and recover the will. Whatever it says, we'll deal with the truth rather than live with Isabella's lies. The three of them spent the rest of the day making careful plans. Adrian would create a distraction by organizing an impromptu poetry reading in the Great Hall, drawing as many people as possible away from the royal quarters. Elena would keep watch while Marcus searched Isabella's chambers for the will and any other evidence of her deception. As evening approached, Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had started this by choosing to investigate a suspicious light. Now he was about to commit what could technically be considered burglary of the Queen Consort's private rooms. But sometimes, he reflected, duty required actions that looked like crimes from the outside. The plan began smoothly. Adrian's poetry reading drew a respectable crowd, including Isabella herself, who sat in the front row with a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus watched from the back of the hall until he was certain she was settled, then slipped away toward the royal quarters. Elena was already in position near Isabella's chambers, dressed in dark clothing and keeping watch from an alcove that provided a clear view of the corridors. She nodded to Marcus as he approached. "The coast is clear," she whispered. "But hurry, these readings usually last only an hour." Marcus had studied the castle's layout extensively during his years of service, but he had never been inside the Queen Consort's private chambers. The rooms were luxuriously appointed, filled with furniture and artwork from Isabella's homeland of Astoria. The scent of expensive perfume hung in the air, the same scent he had noticed in the king's study the night before. He began his search systematically, checking the obvious places first: the desk, dresser drawers, and jewelry boxes. Finding nothing, he moved to more creative hiding spots. Behind paintings, inside book spines hollowed out for concealment, and within the linings of trunks and wardrobes. It was in the bottom drawer of an ornate writing desk that he found what he was looking for. The king's will lay beneath a collection of letters, and Marcus's heart sank as he examined it. The document showed clear signs of alteration, scratched out words, additions in different ink, and sections that appeared to have been rewritten entirely. But that wasn't all he found. Beneath the will were letters bearing the seal of Mordania, Valdoria's traditional enemy to the east. Marcus's hands trembled as he read correspondence between Isabella and Lord Commander Garrett of Mordania, discussing troop movements, supply routes, and what appeared to be plans for a coordinated attack on Valdoria following King Edmund's death. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Isabella wasn't just planning to usurp the throne, she was planning to hand Valdoria over to its enemies. Her marriage to King Edmund had been part of a long-term strategy to weaken the kingdom from within. "Captain!" Elena's urgent whisper from the doorway made him look up. "Someone's coming." Marcus quickly gathered the will and the most damaging letters, shoving them inside his coat. As he moved toward the door, he heard the sound of multiple footsteps approaching rapidly down the corridor. "This way!" Elena hissed, pulling him toward a tapestry that concealed a servant's passage. They slipped through just as the main door to Isabella's chambers opened. Through a gap in the tapestry, Marcus could see Isabella entering with two guards he didn't recognize. Foreign guards, by their appearance and weapons. "Search everything," Isabella was saying. "Someone has been in here. I can feel it." Marcus and Elena pressed themselves against the stone wall of the narrow passage, hardly daring to breathe. They could hear furniture being moved, drawers being opened, and Isabella's increasingly agitated voice as she discovered the missing documents. "The will is gone," she said flatly, "and the Mordanian correspondence." "Shall we search the castle, Your Majesty?" one of the guards asked in accented English. "No. That would only confirm our guilt. We proceed with the original plan, but accelerated. Send word to Lord Commander Garrett immediately. Tell him King Edmund died tonight and the succession is in dispute. Valdoria needs Mordania's assistance to restore order." Marcus felt Elena's sharp intake of breath beside him. Isabella was planning to fake the king's death to justify calling in foreign troops. It was a plan of breathtaking audacity and treachery. "What about whoever took the documents?" the second guard asked. "They won't have time to act on what they found," Isabella said coldly. "By dawn, Mordanian forces will be crossing our borders in response to our urgent request for help with internal strife. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it will be too late." Marcus and Elena waited in the hidden passage until they were certain Isabella and her guards had left. When they finally emerged, both were shaking, not with fear, but with fury. "She's going to sell our kingdom to Mordania," Elena whispered, "and murder Father in the process." "Not if we stop her first," Marcus replied grimly. But as they made their way back through the castle's secret passages, both knew that their small conspiracy had just become a race against time. Isabella had accelerated her timeline, and Valdoria's enemies were already moving. The next few hours would determine whether the ancient kingdom survived or fell to the most elaborate betrayal in its history. The documents hidden in Marcus's coat felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. They contained proof of Isabella's crimes, but would that proof matter if Mordanian troops were already marching toward Valdoria's borders? The game had changed, and the stakes had just become life and death, not just for them, but for everyone they had sworn to protect. Part 3. The pre-dawn hours at Valdoria Castle had never felt more urgent. Marcus, Elena, and Adrian huddled in the prince's private study. The stolen documents spread across his desk like pieces of a deadly puzzle. The evidence was overwhelming. Isabella's alterations to the will, her correspondence with Mordanian military leaders, and most damning of all, detailed plans for what appeared to be a coordinated invasion disguised as assistance to resolve Valdoria's succession crisis. "We have to warn Father immediately," Elena said, pacing the small room like a caged wolf. "And tell him what exactly?" Adrian asked, his scholarly mind working through the implications. "That his wife of 5 years has been planning to hand our kingdom over to our enemies?" "He's dying, Elena. The shock alone could kill him." Marcus studied the correspondence more carefully, noting dates and details. "Your Highness, I don't think we have a choice about telling the king. Look at this letter. It's dated 3 days ago. Isabella told the Mordanians that King Edmund would be dead within a week, and that she would need their help to maintain order during the succession dispute." "But Father isn't dead," Elena said. "He's weak, yes, but the physicians say he could live for weeks yet." "Not if Isabella decides to accelerate that timeline too," Adrian said quietly.
The terrible implication hung in the air between them.
If Isabella was willing to forge royal documents and commit treason, would she stop at murder to make her plans work? "We need more allies," Marcus said. "And we need them now. The 3 of us alone cannot stop what's coming." "Lord Chancellor Whitmore," Elena suggested. "He served the crown for 30 years. He would never support treason." Adrian nodded. "And General Morrison. He commands the Royal Guard and the palace troops. If we can convince him of what Isabella is planning, what about the evidence?" Marcus asked. "Should we confront Isabella directly? That would give her a chance to destroy anything we haven't found yet," Elena said, "and it might force her to act even more quickly." A soft knock at the door made all 3 of them freeze.
Adrian moved to answer it, revealing his trusted valet, Thomas, who had served the royal family for decades.
"Your Highness," Thomas said quietly, "forgive the intrusion, but I thought you should know. Queen Isabella has just left the castle with an escort of 6 guards."
They took the road toward the eastern border. Marcus felt his blood chill. The eastern border was where Mordania's forces would be gathering. "How long ago?" "Perhaps 20 minutes, sir. I was attending to duties in the servants' quarters when I saw them from the window." Eleanor grabbed Marcus's arm. "She's gone to meet them personally, to coordinate the final details of the invasion. Or to tell them that the plan has been discovered and they need to attack immediately." Adrian added grimly. Marcus made a decision. "Your Highnesses, we're out of time for careful planning. Thomas, can you discreetly gather Lord Chancellor Whitmore and General Morrison? Tell them the royal family needs to speak with them urgently about a matter of kingdom security." "Of course, sir." Thomas bowed and hurried away. While they waited, the 3 conspirators continued examining the documents, building their case. The evidence painted a picture of betrayal that went back years. Isabella's marriage to King Edmund had been orchestrated by Mordanian agents as part of a long-term strategy to weaken Valdoria from within. "Look at this," Adrian said, holding up a letter written in Isabella's hand. "She's been providing intelligence about our defenses, our troop strengths, even our food supplies and winter preparations. Mordania knows everything about our capabilities and our weaknesses," Elena added bitterly. "She's given them a complete blueprint for conquering us." Lord Chancellor Whitmore arrived first, a distinguished man in his 60s, whose loyalty to the crown was absolute. His face grew increasingly grave as they showed him the evidence. General Morrison followed shortly after, a gruff military man whose strategic mind immediately grasped the tactical implications of what Isabella had done. "My God," Whitmore breathed, studying the forged will. The audacity of it. To alter the king's final wishes and then use the resulting confusion to justify foreign intervention. "How long do we have?" General Morrison asked, ever practical. If Isabella left 20 minutes ago and the Mordanians are already positioned near our border, hours at most, Marcus replied. Maybe less. General Morrison was already moving. I'll mobilize the palace guard immediately and send riders to alert our border garrisons. But Captain Sterling, I have to tell you, we're not prepared for a coordinated attack. Isabella's intelligence about our defenses is accurate. We have perhaps 300 men here at the castle, and our main army is dispersed across the kingdom on various duties. What about allies? Elena asked. Other kingdoms who would come to our aid? Not quickly enough, Whitmore said. Diplomatic messages take days to send and receive. By the time help could arrive, Valdoria could be under Mordanian control, Adrian finished. The room fell silent as they contemplated their situation. They had uncovered the conspiracy, but they might have done so too late to prevent it.
There is one option, Elena said slowly. It's dangerous, and it requires perfect timing, but it might work. Everyone turned to her expectantly.
Isabella expects chaos and confusion when news of father's death reaches the people in the High Council, Elena continued. She's counting on that confusion to justify Mordanian intervention. But what if there is no confusion? What if the succession is clear and uncontested before she returns? You mean legitimate yourself as ruler before she can act? Whitmore said, understanding immediately. Exactly. If I'm already recognized as the rightful heir, with the support of the High Council and the military, Isabella's claim becomes worthless. The Mordanians would be invading a united kingdom with a clear chain of command, not a realm in chaos. Adrian nodded slowly. It could work. But it would require father to formally change his will before he couldn't finish the sentence. Before he dies or becomes too ill to make legal decisions, Elena said gently. I know, brother. It's asking him to face his own mortality directly. General Morrison cleared his throat. Your Highnesses, forgive my bluntness, but we're discussing theoretical solutions when we should be preparing for war. Even if your plan works perfectly, Isabella will still return with Mordanian forces. They won't simply turn around and go home because our succession is settled. Actually, they might, Whitmore said thoughtfully. Mordania's entire justification for intervention depends on Valdoria being unable to maintain order. If we demonstrate that we have strong, unified leadership and are fully capable of defending ourselves, they lose their excuse for invasion. It becomes naked aggression instead of humanitarian assistance. And naked aggression against a prepared enemy is much more costly than intervention in a chaotic situation, Marcus added, his military training showing, especially if we can get word to other kingdoms about what Isabella and Mordania were really planning. Elena stood up, decision made. Then we do this. All of it. General Morrison, prepare the defences and mobilise what troops you can. Lord Chancellor, begin the process of calling an emergency session of the High Council. Adrian and I will speak with Father. And Captain Sterling, she continued, I want you to personally oversee the security of everyone in this room. If Isabella has been planning this for years, she might have other allies in the castle we don't know about. As they prepared to leave, Thomas reappeared with more urgent news. Your Highnesses, he said breathlessly, I've just received word from the eastern border. A large force of Mordanian cavalry was spotted approaching our territory. The border guards estimate at least 500 riders, with more following. The room erupted in activity. General Morrison began barking orders to mobilize defenses. Whitmore hurried away to begin the legal processes needed for Elena's succession. Marcus checked his weapons and prepared to escort the royal siblings to their father's chambers. But as they moved through the castle corridors, Eleanor grabbed Marcus's arm. Captain, there's something else we need to consider. Isabella left with 6 guards, but she's been planning this for years. How many people in this castle are actually loyal to her instead of to father? How do we know we can trust anyone? It was a sobering thought. Isabella had been queen consort for 5 years, with ample opportunity to place her own people in key positions throughout the castle. Guards, servants, even members of the High Council might be compromised. We trust the people we've known longest, Marcus replied. Thomas, General Morrison, Lord Chancellor Whitmore, people whose loyalty predates Isabella's arrival. For everyone else, we assume the worst and hope for the best, Elena finished grimly. As they approached King Edmund's chambers, the sound of approaching hoofbeats could be heard echoing across the castle courtyard. Time was running out, faster than they had hoped. The final confrontation was approaching, and the fate of Valdoria hung in the balance. In his chambers, a dying king would soon learn of his wife's ultimate betrayal. On the eastern border, enemy forces were massing for an invasion disguised as assistance. And in the castle itself, loyalties that had seemed certain for years were about to be tested in ways that would determine whether the kingdom of Valdoria would survive the night. The documents in Marcus's coat had started a chain of events that could not be stopped. Now they had to see it through to whatever end awaited them all. Part 4. King Edmund Valdoria lay propped against silk pillows, his once powerful frame reduced by illness but his mind still sharp. The morning light filtering through the tall windows revealed the toll that months of declining health had taken, but his eyes remained clear and alert as his children approached his bedside. "Father," Elena said softly, taking his hand. "We need to tell you something important." Marcus remained by the door, both guarding against interruption and ready to present the evidence when needed. The sound of rapid preparations outside, soldiers shouting orders, horses being readied, weapons being distributed, created an urgency that permeated even the quiet sanctuary of the king's chambers. Edmund studied his children's faces with the perception that had made him a successful ruler for 26 years. "This is about Isabella, isn't it?" The simple question caught them off guard. Adrian and Elena exchanged glances before Elena nodded. "How long have you known?" she asked. Edmund's laugh was weak but bitter. "Suspected for months. Confirmed last night when she thought I was asleep and made a rather revealing conversation with someone she believed to be her Mordanian contact. My hearing, unlike the rest of me, remains excellent." Marcus stepped forward, producing the documents. "Your Majesty, we have evidence of the full scope of her betrayal." As Edmund examined the forged will and correspondence, his expression grew steadily darker. The hands that had once wielded swords against Valdoria's enemies now shook with fury rather than illness. 5 years, he said quietly. 5 years of marriage and it was all a lie. Every moment, every gesture of affection, every piece of advice she offered, all in service to our enemies. "Father, there's more," Elena said gently. "She's already left to meet with Mordanian forces. They're planning to invade under the pretense of helping resolve a succession crisis." "A crisis she created by forging my will," Edmund said with disgust. "And I suppose my convenient death was also part of her timeline?" The question hung in the air, unanswered but understood by everyone in the room. "Sir," Marcus said respectfully, "we need your guidance. General Morrison is preparing the castle's defenses, but we're outnumbered. Our best hope may be to eliminate their justification for invasion entirely." Edmund looked at his children with pride and pain warring in his eyes. "Elena, your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. Adrian, your courage in facing truths that pain you shows the strength I've always known you possess."
He struggled to sit up straighter.
"I had planned to divide the kingdom between you, thinking it would give you both the chance to rule in your own ways. But Isabella was right about one thing. Divided, Valdoria would be vulnerable. Elena, are you prepared to rule alone?"
"Not alone," Elena said firmly.
"With Adrian as my closest advisor, with loyal servants like Captain Sterling, with the support of people who love this kingdom." "But yes, Father." "I'm ready." Edmund nodded slowly. "Adrian, your sister will need your wisdom and your perspective. Are you prepared to serve as her counsel?" "Gladly," Adrian replied without hesitation. "I've spent years studying the kingdoms around us, their histories, their strengths and weaknesses. I can serve Valdoria better as an advisor than I ever could as a king. Then it's settled." Edmund's voice grew stronger as he made his decision. "Captain Sterling, please ask Lord Chancellor Whitmore to come here immediately. We're going to draft a new will, properly witnessed and sealed, naming Elena as my sole heir, and Adrian as her chief advisor." As Marcus hurried to fetch Whitmore, the sound of approaching conflict grew louder outside. Thomas appeared in the doorway with news that sent everyone's hearts racing. "Your Majesties, General Morrison reports that Mordanian forces are within sight of the castle. Queen Isabella rides at their head, with what appears to be a formal declaration of some kind." Elena moved to the window, her jaw tightening as she saw the approaching army. "She's bringing them directly here instead of waiting for news of Father's death. She must know we've discovered her plans. Then we face them with the truth," Edmund said firmly. Despite his physical weakness, the authority in his voice reminded everyone why he had ruled successfully for over 2 decades. "Whitmore, how quickly can we make my new will legally binding? If we have 3 witnesses and the royal seal, it can be done immediately, Your Majesty." Whitmore replied, "Already preparing the necessary documents." "And how quickly can we convene an emergency session of the High Council to recognize Elena as heir apparent?" "The senior members are already in the castle due to concerns about your health, sir. I can have them assembled within the hour." We don't have an hour, Marcus said, returning from a quick consultation with General Morrison. The Mordanians will reach the main gate in 20 minutes. Edmund made his final decision with the decisiveness that had defined his reign. Then we do this now, in front of everyone. Elena, send word throughout the castle that the king will make an important announcement in the Great Hall immediately. Everyone, servants, guards, nobles, everyone who can fit, should attend. Father, you're not strong enough.
Elena began.
I'm strong enough for this, Edmund said firmly. And it may be the most important thing I've ever done. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of activity. Servants ran throughout the castle spreading word of the king's announcement. Guards helped Edmund dress in his formal royal robes. The crown, which hadn't been worn in months, was placed carefully on his head. As the great hall filled with confused but expectant people, the sound of Mordanian horns could be heard approaching the castle gates. Isabella's voice, magnified by rage and desperation, carried across the courtyard as she demanded entry. "People of Valdoria!" she was shouting. "Your king is dead. The succession is in dispute. I have brought our allies from Mordania to help maintain peace and order." But instead of the chaos and confusion she expected, Isabella found the castle gates firmly closed, and every battlement manned by loyal Valdorian soldiers. The response to her announcement came not from panicked servants or confused guards, but from the clear voice of a herald speaking from the main tower. Her Majesty Queen Isabella is mistaken. King Edmund lives and will address his people momentarily. Inside the great hall, Edmund stood before his assembled subjects, with Elena on his right and Adrian on his left. His voice, though weakened by illness, carried clearly throughout the vast space. "My loyal subjects," he began, "today I must reveal a conspiracy that threatens the very existence of our kingdom."
He held up the evidence Marcus had recovered.
"My wife Isabella has committed treason against the crown and against all of you. She has forged my will, corresponded with our enemies, and now attempts to hand Valdoria over to Mordanian rule." Gasps and angry murmurs filled the hall, but Edmund continued. "However, her treachery has been discovered by loyal servants, who put duty to Valdoria above all else. Captain Marcus Sterling, Princess Elena, and Prince Adrian have saved our kingdom through their vigilance and courage." He turned to Elena, his voice growing stronger with pride. "Therefore, I hereby name my daughter, Eleanor Catherine Valdoria, as my sole heir and successor. She will rule with wisdom, strength, and the loyal counsel of her brother, Adrian. Let no one question the succession or attempt to undermine it." Lord Chancellor Whitmore stepped forward with the new will, properly signed and witnessed. "Let it be recorded that King Edmund's final will and testament has been duly executed and witnessed according to all laws of Valdoria." The cheers that erupted from the assembled crowd could be heard throughout the castle and beyond its walls. Outside, Isabella's demands for entry grew more frantic as she realized her carefully laid plans were crumbling. General Morrison appeared at Edmund's side. "Your Majesty, Isabella is demanding to speak with you. She claims the Mordanians are here at her invitation to help with internal strife." "Then let her speak," Edmund said firmly, "but not as my wife, as a traitor to be judged by the crown and people of Valdoria." The great doors of the hall were opened, and Isabella strode in, flanked by Mordanian officers. Her face was a mask of fury as she saw Edmund standing strong, Elena beside him wearing the ceremonial circlet that marked her as heir apparent, and Adrian holding the forged documents that proved her crimes. "Edmund," she said, trying to maintain her royal bearing, "you don't understand the situation. Valdoria needs Mordanian assistance to maintain stability during this difficult transition." "The only transition happening here," Elena interrupted, stepping forward with newfound authority, "is your transition from queen consort to prisoner awaiting trial for treason." Isabella's composure finally cracked completely. "You fools!" "Do you think these theatrics will stop what's already in motion? Mordanian forces surround this castle. You can play at legitimacy all you want, but reality is 500 cavalry and 2,000 infantry who will take this kingdom whether you consent or not." The Mordanian officers beside her shifted uncomfortably. This was not the scenario they had been prepared for. Instead of entering a kingdom in chaos, they faced a united people with clear leadership and prepared defenses. Edmund stepped forward, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. "Commander," he addressed the senior Mordanian officer, "you were told you were coming to assist with internal strife in a kingdom without clear leadership. As you can see, Valdoria has clear leadership and no internal strife except that created by this traitor. Your justification for being here no longer exists." The Mordanian commander looked between Isabella and the assembled Valdorians, clearly calculating the political and military costs of proceeding. Naked aggression against a prepared kingdom with legitimate leadership would be much more expensive than the easy conquest Isabella had promised. Your Majesty, the commander said carefully, we were indeed told that Valdoria was in chaos and needed assistance. This appears to have been inaccurate information. Deliberately inaccurate, Edmund confirmed. Provided by someone who was working to betray both our kingdom's interests. Isabella made one final, desperate attempt. They're lying. Edmund is dying. The succession is disputed. They're only enough. Edmund's voice filled the hall with power that silenced everyone present. Isabella of Astoria, you are hereby charged with high treason, forgery of royal documents, conspiracy with foreign enemies, and attempted usurpation of the crown. You will be held for trial under Valdorian law. The crowd's roar of approval shook the castle walls. Marcus stepped forward with several loyal guards to arrest Isabella, who finally seemed to understand that her years of planning had failed completely. As Isabella was led away in chains, the Mordanian commander approached Edmund with something resembling respect. Your Majesty, it appears we have been deceived about the situation in Valdoria. We will withdraw immediately with our apologies for this misunderstanding. See that you do, Elena said, her voice carrying her father's authority. And Commander, make sure your king understands that Valdoria remembers its friends and its enemies. How Mordania chooses to be remembered is up to you. As the Mordanian forces withdrew and the immediate crisis passed, Edmund finally allowed his exhaustion to show. Elena and Adrian supported him as he addressed his people one final time. The crown's secret is revealed and Valdoria stands stronger for the telling. Princess Elena will rule with wisdom and strength when my time comes, but until then we rebuild and strengthen what was nearly lost through betrayal. The cheers that followed carried across the kingdom, spreading news of the thwarted conspiracy and the princess who would soon be queen. In the days that followed, the full extent of Isabella's treachery would be revealed through trials that shocked neighboring kingdoms and strengthened Valdoria's alliances with those who valued honor and loyalty. Captain Marcus Sterling, the guard whose vigilance had started it all, was elevated to head of palace security and given lands befitting his service to the crown. Adrian became Elena's chief advisor, using his scholarly knowledge to help rebuild and strengthen the kingdom's defenses. And Elena herself grew into the role of heir apparent, preparing for the day when she would rule a kingdom that had learned valuable lessons about the price of vigilance and the value of truth. The crown's secret had nearly destroyed Valdoria, but in the end, it had made the kingdom stronger than ever before.